My name is Kenneth Ross. I'm a professor in the Department of Entomology here at the University of Georgia. I've been here over 35 years, and the whole time I've been here, I've been studying fire ants. That's what my laboratory does primarily, is study fire ants. They are a pest because they sting people, and they build large, unsightly mounds that are light on people's lawns in suburban Atlanta, and also that those mounds can damage farm equipment if they're on pastures or farmland. So they have an unfortunate ecological role or ecological effect because they're an invasive species. They tend to compete with our native ants and cause damage to them, reduce their populations, outcompete them. And they also evidently feed on and cause quite considerable damage to ground-dwelling animals, ground nesting birds, and so on. Ants in general are wonderful and interesting insects, animals, and they're very important ecologically. Ants are, and fire ants in particular. They live in huge societies with hundreds of thousands of workers at their peak. The workers are sterile, so their egg laying is done by a specialized female called the queen. About the time I arrived in the early 1980s, a few scientists were shocked to discover that there were colonies that had multiple queens, sometimes hundreds, from a few to hundreds of egg-laying mated queens. It doesn't sound like it's a big difference. The colony has one queen or many. It doesn't sound like a big deal. But actually, each of the two types differs in many reproductive and dispersal life history characteristics. So they're really quite discrete syndromes, the single queen and the multiple queen. They have different strategies of colony founding, different mating habits, different colony densities, lots of differences. So as people looked at them and began to understand how different they are, the question arose whether they might be different species. Once we learned they were the same species, we became interested in what could be the causes of these differences between them. One possibility was it was environmentally determined, that they live in somewhat different habitats. We found no evidence for that. Other researchers looked at that quite carefully. Long story short, we ended up finding that there are genetic differences between them. And several decades later, we now understand that they differ in terms of one chromosome. They have 16 chromosomes. One of those chromosomes, in fact, half of that chromosome, differs between the two social groups. And within that half a chromosome are a few hundred genes that presumably regulate the social organization of the colony. So we're honing in now on trying to figure out what those genes are and what they do. And that's important because first of all, there are not many cases in which it's been shown that social behavior of any type is under strong genetic control. So just showing that there is a strong genetic underlying influence on a complex social trait is quite interesting biologically, evolutionarily speaking. So, as is the case with many, if not most, pest insects, our strategy is just to manage the populations, to keep them at a tolerable level. We're hoping that what we've learned in terms of the genetics of their reproduction, that may lead in some way to new control measures based on genetic manipulation. So we can't begin to consider that, though, until we have a very sound, basic understanding of their genetics.